Well, this is the first video after the removal of my very large channel in my name, Vinyasi, in which, yeah, I can be suppressed, but I can't be shut up, because the creative instinct and the willingness and desire to share, which are the hallmarks of the Aquarian dispensation, are alive and well, and if not in me, in somebody else, but I'm still alive, so it's still well. I'm learning various things, and the point of this video is what I learned about Surya, the deity, or the quality, or the aspect of deity which has to do with the personification and the administration of the Pitta dosha. If you go to my website, vinyasi.info, I have at the bottom of the page a contact form, and somebody emailed me a question, and I thought my response was worth posting, so I posted it there. And then a continuation. It didn't last long. It was just a conversation of two back and forths, because I didn't want to favor the guy's focus, which was on electromagnetic theory and computer science, and I didn't really want to develop it in that direction. I was more inclined to develop in the direction of yoga, because and Vedic understanding of reality, because I'm at a phase now in which I'm not really interested in pursuing electromagnetic study. I still, tweak my health protocols, and I see improvements, but I still have problems. I have poor digestion, and I have bloat. But I'm extremely happy with my diet. I'm not at all displeased. In fact, I tickle all over every time I eat a meal. But what else? And I focus on my twice-a-day practice of transcendental meditation, and I rest a lot. I sleep, I rest, I take it easy. As it is, I've got something, that requires my focus, and that's actually a very strong incentive, because, or not to focus on EM theory, because you have to feel pretty good and safe and secure and stable to at least I would do, to study electromagnetic theory. And I can't. It's everything is up in the air. It's like personal stuff. I just feel very unstable. So I'm focusing on stabilizing, but I couldn't help while taking the trash out, that it came to me, this mystery, this question in my mind: what is the nature of Surya with regard to shame? Because it was one of my insights that there are 6 emotions that are equivalent or relatable to the 6 deities of Prakriti, namely Prakriti being creation, the relativity, and also is the field of Akasha. Because if you go back to, but it's not the absolute, and it's not the gap between the two. So the gap is another deity, or personification of deity, and then the absolute has another personification of deity, which we all know, the Almighty, Supreme Being. But the gap is the second, is second only to the Almighty in its importance, and its dharma is the personification of smriti, if I could say it right, which means in English memory. And very often you'll get people who say, when they become enlightened, they say, I remember, because they remember what they've already known but have forgotten. It's like a prodigal son analogy, or a prodigal child comes back to the realization that he never left home. He or she, never left home, never left the home of the self, the transcendental self. Even though Maya has been distracting us all this time, the illusion that relativity is real. Well, to the to the sense of perception, it is, and to the experience of perception, it sure is. But it's not non-changing, and so because it keeps changing, how can it be called real? Because it has no, because it always keeps changing into something else, you know. And of course, then we have the three gunas, which are the field of cause, which is counter space, which is the ether, and then we have their effect, which are the three doshas, which is in space, as opposed to counter space. And space and ether are the two translations of the word akasha. If you go back to, over time, if you go back to the 1800s when the ether was king, and there's an expression in the Vedas, purnamida purnamidam, this is full, that is full. In other words, two fullnesses, the fullness of emptiness, but also the fullness of fullness. Two limits, two hyperbolic functional limits to infinity. And zero is the opposite of infinity. And in one's complement arithmetic, which is used in assembler machine language computer programming at the base level of computer programming, involving the registers and logic gates, that's the base level that a computer operates at, and there are two infinities, because if you take a number and subtract it from itself, you get negative zero. And the computer scientists in the beginning days of computering didn't like that. So then what they instituted was 2's complement arithmetic immediately after performing a mathematical operation of any sort, in order to clear out any possibility or potential for negative zero resulting, and just bring back positive zero every time. And I don't remember the mechanics of 2's complement. I just know that that's... I never wanted to commit it to memory because I knew it was a sleight of hand, so why would I want to remember that? Move the beans around underneath the the upside down cups, and then you don't know which cup the bean is under. But 1's complement is very straightforward. It's very logical, very regulated, and it's honest, because it depicts two limits to counting. And the fact that we think zero is a countable number is a bunch of bogus BS, because it's only true in the abstract, but it's BS in the concrete. There's no such thing as zero in the concrete world, just like there's no such thing as infinity in the concrete world. All we have are relativistic limits to counting, an upper and a lower, a maximum and a minimum. And we take the minimum to be zero, and we take the maximum to be infinity, but we take it to be the equivalent to those two entities that exist only in the abstract realm of the ideal. The word ideal is the word that Plato used to talk about this other realm that's not concrete. And yet he said that in the cave of the mind, the concrete world is nothing but shadows cast upon the wall. In other words, we cast shadows upon the wall. We are shadow people living in a shadow world known as the concrete world, while the abstract is the real, and the transcendental is the light that lights, that casts those shadows on the wall of the mind, on the wall of perception, on the screen of the mind, actually, on the screen of the mind. Anyway. So if you go back to the 1800s, when you look up for a translation dictionary between Sanskrit and English, and you look up the word akasha, it translates into the ether, and that's fullness of fullness. But now, if you go online to that same Mueller-based, they call it Mueller, they've already changed the English word, and now it's space that akasha translates to, and we take space to be empty, fullness of emptiness. So we have two fullnesses, fullness of fullness being yang, fullness of emptiness being yin. So the Tao also mirrors what the Vedas talk about, purnamida purnamidam. And these are the two infinities. Well, they're really two realms of the relative, cause and effect, counter space and space, the ether and space, but yet both are akasha, both are prakriti, the field of the relative, Maya. And there are 6 personifications of the 6 forces of nature. 3 of them are the 3 gunas, the three forces of nature that cause things to come into being, and three are the three doshas that are their effects. And the cause is in counter space, or the ether, and the effect is in space, which is empty, for the most part. But that's their relationship. So the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are usually signified in physics as the three operators: start, maintain, and stop. Start, of course, is Brahma. He's the creator, the personification of sattva. Rajas is the maintainer, and so that's personified by Vishnu. By the way, religion and avatars come through Vishnu, such as Christ and Osiris. And tamas is destruction, and it's personified by Shiva. Now, transcendental meditators go by the path of Shiva because they destroy death. It is the death of death to transcend the relative and go to the absolute, because the goal is to break free of the wheel of rebirth, the wheel of necessity, the necessity being that this body we live in is corporeal, it degrades, it changes, and it doesn't last forever. And our goal is to get a body that will, and it's a body made of akasha. So once we're enlightened, we have this body of akasha, and then we drop the body of this thing, then we still have that body of akasha, and it's immortal, and it's self-luminous, and 3/4 of creation is actually taken up by self-luminous worlds of the absolute. So actually creation goes beyond the relative to include the absolute, as well as the gap between the two. And so the absolute is 3 times greater than the relative, and there are worlds there. Self-luminous worlds inhabited by self-luminous, fully enlightened creatures. And that's the goal of human existence, is to graduate out of the relative corporeal world of change and graduate into the absolute world of non-change, in which we still have our identity, our unique identities, but for some reason we also have a unity, despite our uniquenesses, and that just juxtaposition of opposites cannot be resolved until we drop the physical body and are fully enlightened, Mahasamadhi, and then we'll appreciate and understand that irony, which we can't understand now. It's unless you want to make yourself believe you understand it. I can't see how to understand it. Anyway, so those are the personifications of the three gunas, and then the three doshas stand in between the gunas. So you get 2 gunas to blend together to make a dosha. It's the interaction of 2 gunas and one dominating the other, one guna dominating the other, that will create shade variations of the dosha that it creates. But there are 3 basic doshas, 3 basic effects of blending 2 gunas at a time, in which one guna dominates the other. They never are equal in force, because if they were, if you blended the sattva and the tamas together in equal measure, you get total annihilation and nothing would result, because one creates and the other destroys. So there's always the situation in that there's imbalance, and nature is always trying to create balance out of imbalance, and that's why we have karma, and that's why we have the wheel of necessity that keeps going and going and going and never stops, because it takes rest periodically, just like we do, very long rest, but then it kicks back into activity, and then it's just an endless cycle of rest and activity. To nature, to the relativistic side of nature. So between sattva and tamas is kapha dosha, and that's personified by Mother Divine, and the emotion involved is humor. Now, interestingly enough, the 3 gunas, the emotions are very negative. Fear is the emotion of Vishnu, because fear is the innate fear we have that we will never be able to maintain everything comparable to the status quo of our comfort zone. And so we're constantly endeavoring to reduce the margin of error for failing to maintain our status as comfortable creatures living in a very vulnerable world, such as we do. You know, we're mostly made out of water, so we're very vulnerable. So that's Shiva, or excuse me, that's Vishnu and personifying maintenance, Rajoguna, and the fear associated. Now Shiva is anger, and of course anger destroys whatever it touches, especially those things that we love the most. We destroy the most with our anger. And Brahma is grief. And I still can't get over that the tears of Brahma are divine creations, you and I, and everything else in this known universe that the Creator creates, out of sattva, out of purity, out of sat, out of pure energy, out of pure creativity. But Mother Divine is humor, and you know, Maharishi must have been the embodiment of Mother Divine. Once a year he would fast for maybe 2 weeks and take very long meditation to try to connect with Mother Divine and get, you know, instructions for and insight for the coming year, what to do for the TM movement, what plan to take, what avenue, what angle to emphasize. And he was just transcending all the time, and he was just giggling all the time as a result of that transcending while in activity. And I suspect he was also levitating all the time, but faking walking and sitting and lying down to create a bubble. Because I've had a meditator, governor, tell me that a bubble surrounded him with a 1/4 mile radius. And inside that bubble you can't see his aura, because you can't see the borderline between where the aura is and where it ends, because you're in it for a whole 1/4 mile radius. So he was constantly creating that 1/4 mile of darshan because he was constantly levitating. So he actually went one step beyond Milarepa, who obviously levitated. Well, Maharishi just faked it. Faked not levitating. And somebody asked him on a tape I remember watching, Maharishi, why don't you perform miracles, you know? And he says, I do all the time, you just don't notice. So there's one example of a miracle that he performed all the time and we never noticed. But the hint is, Denny Goodman is a teacher of TM, and he said that, you know, if you watch carefully the Lake Louise video, and I have it on my website, vinyasi.info, at the bottom there. One is an interview with Crane, Mr. Crane, I forget his first name, and the other is the Lake Louise video. He very firmly plants his feet down. I just thought that was the way he walked, you know. But then he was saying, no, that's to make sure he doesn't fly off the ground. When he takes a step, he doesn't go bouncing off, you know, like, you know, people on the moon, you know, moonwalk, you know, astronauts, you know, bouncing along, because it's so effortless, because they're so weightless. Well, when you've got no weight, it's very easy to go flying off, you know, every time you take a step. So that's why Denny said he walks the way he did in that video, because he's firmly putting his feet down to make sure he doesn't. He's imagining, I guess, he has gravity boots, because without which he wouldn't be able to walk on the ground. And I suspect he did this the minute he left India, if he didn't do it prior. Maybe when he left Rishikesh to go to Mother Divine Temple in the south, he probably just, because the friend he was with said, why would you want to go out there, you know, beyond the border, it's mud out there, why do you want to leave the Valley of the Saints, Rishikesh, and go out into the mud? And so I suspect that's his response was, you know, because he had this nagging thought, and then his friend said, well, gee, duh, if it doesn't go away, then you're going to have to go to get rid of the thought. And Maharishi never went back permanently for any permanent length of time. Not that he didn't try. Anyway, But karma brought him out at that point. I won't get into that. Um, so I suspect he took created a bubble of immunity, because that's what he said, is around Fairfield, is a bubble of immunity, because of all the meditators doing the flying program in the two domes, and creating this bubble of invincibility. Actually, that was the word he used. Bubble of invincibility, or sphere of invincibility, something along those lines. So I suspect that's what he was doing. The minute he left the Valley of the Saints in the Kashmiri mountains of Rishikesh Valley, River Valley, that he just decided to envelope himself with a bubble of invincibility, so that anybody who comes within that bubble, is under the sway of the effect of him practicing the Levitation Sutra of Yoga Patanjali, Maharishi Patanjali, all the time. Anywho, so Mother Divine is humor, and then Ganesh is lust. And what we call the thirst for knowledge is actually the lust for knowledge, because aren't you kind of slutty going from book to book, reading, authors, and going to lecturers, and learning from various people? Aren't you kind of like a slut for knowledge? Because you lust for knowledge, you thirst for knowledge in a lusty way, and that's why lust goes with Ganesh, the personification of wisdom. And I've always suspected there's something sexual about Ganesh, because, he's got a nose that looks like a long penis, and that's one of the jokes, we call a penis a trunk, sometimes a one-eyed cobra, but it's also been called a trunk. Oh, how do you breathe through that, And that's when you have a foreskin and it looks more like a trunk. And then the broken tusk could be a broken testicle or a missing testicle. And then to have the head cut off of that child of Shiva, that boy son of Shiva. I forget which wife was the one that gave him that son, but at any rate, and then replaced with the head of an elephant, is very much an Osirian metaphor, because the mythological story of Osiris is that he was hacked to death, and then his wife, Isis, put together all the pieces. She ran around looking for all the pieces, of the dead corpse, put it together and glued it with some kind of glue and brought it back to life, but she couldn't find the genitals. And so Osiris, when he was revived by his wife Isis, lacked genitals. And to me, that's what it means, mythologically, or metaphorically, I should say, in which the son of Shiva lost its head. In English we say, well, you lose your head, you lose your sanity, right? Okay, perhaps. But in the case of that, the trunk, what they decide to replace it with is obvious. It's a pair of genitals, it's a set of genitals. And the trunk very much, is indicative of a lingam, and the two tusks as two testicles. So I think it's not out of place to associate Ganesh with lust, who, by the way, is a dosha, the Vata dosha, born of the imbalanced union between Shiva and Sattva, Shiva and Brahma. So Shiva and Brahma. So ultimately, Shiva's consort was a personification, an incarnation of Brahma. It would have to have been, to create this child of Vata dosha, personified by Ganesh. So that leaves the last of the six personifications of the six forces of Maya, which is the Pitta dosha, which is born of the union of Tamas and Rajas, Shiva and Vishnu. And that is Surya. Now, I'll venture a guess, and it's just a speculation here, that all of the avatars are embodiments of Ra. the Egyptian god Ra, which is the sun in Egyptian mythology and Egyptian religion. Because they did make an attempt to Akhenaten made an attempt at monotheism by instituting a monotheistic religion centered around the sun, which in Sanskrit now is called Surya, and is the Pitta dosha. But unfortunately, the religion didn't last long. It lasted a century after Akhenaten's death. And then the whole town that he instituted, this new capital of Egypt, Iran, was swallowed up by the desert. I can't remember the name of the town. But they instituted sunbathing as their form of worship, to worship their sun god, and sunbathing in the nude. They were nudists. And of course the priesthood cabal that were running the country, the rest of the country, the rest of Egypt, didn't like this because it was bad for their idol business. You know, they were in the business of crafting idols and controlling people, and oh god, they big time control and suppression going on. You know, it's no different than today. But it was done by the priesthood, the establishment priesthood, and so Akhenaten was considered a revolutionary and a rebel before his time. You know, who cares? You know, he made love to his sister. You know, Nefertiti or whoever it was. I forget. Or was that Tutankhamun? You know, a lot of royalty did that very often. They would be married to their sister, their brother-sister pairing. But so the priesthood outlived, and their religion of idol worship, you know, little statuettes of various gods, outlasted Akhenaten's god, which was the sun, which was pretty much an abstraction because you can't make an idol out of it. You can't put it in your home. You have to go outside your home, the stifling condition of your home. And it, you know, it's a form of nature worship and a recognition that there are forces of nature greater than us. But when you have suppression and a hierarchical society, that's the opposite approach. They deny nature. Paganism was wiped out by Christianity, the early Christian missionaries, so that Lady Godiva is no longer riding naked bareback on a horse once every spring to bless the crops of a farmer with her fertility so that he has a good crop that year. Instead, it becomes this thing, well, her evil husband is taxing the people with too many taxes, and a peeping Tom peeps out the window, and something happens to him, because he should be ashamed of himself. Well, shame is the emotion of Surya. So there's a little hint of the pantheistic truth of the matter, that the emotion associated with Surya is shame. Now, why would that be? Because if you get too much sun, you die. You should be ashamed of yourself standing out in the sun so long. Now, if you're black, it's not a problem. And black was Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, you know, Charlie would say this, Adam and Eve were black. You know? They were the black race. They came first before all the others. There were no other. There were no others. When Adam and Eve roamed the earth, they were black. And what better way to greet the sun than with a skin that can handle it? Not like the rest of us, you know. What else? So, and it's no small wonder then that the white dominating race, you know, dominating the Western world, especially in the United States, practices circumcision. And this is something to be ashamed of, because now you can't go out in the sun without getting your sensitive head of your penis fried. But of course, by the time you're a grown-up, you may not notice that you're frying what you cannot get away with otherwise had you been not circumcised, but just had the foreskin peeled back and held back, and then you walk around in the sun naked. How long do you think you can stand that being down on your glands? It'll hurt. Trust me, it'll hurt. Um, so, that's what I had to say about Surya and shame, I think, but I may be missing something. So I am required to do two things: practice the truth and practice the shameful lie. The latter being wearing clothes, and the former wearing a covering for my penis, a prosthetic foreskin, treating it as if it's an open wound. So I wet a gauze with distilled water with some MSM dissolved in that water, and a gauze dressing, a sterile gauze dressing. I cut off a length, and I dip it in there and wring out the excess. And before I wrap the head of my penis in the outer half of it, or 3/4 outer portion, I coat the head and a little bit below the scar line with a gel that I get out of a tube that I now no longer buy from silversolutionusa.com because they're very expensive, but there are competitors that are a little cheaper, such as ActiveZ, ActiveZ.com. Amazon now favors that company and doesn't even supply anything from Silver Solutions to speak of anymore, although they have a legacy of some pictures left over from the prior displays that they used to possess of that particular brand. But it's the same formulation. You know, somebody holds the patent and he's licensing it now to various competitors who retail that patented silver tetraoxide product, which is unstable. Lo and behold, I had a solution of that, not a gel, but a solution with MSM in a cup, and I was dipping my gauze dressing in there and wringing out the excess, and lo and behold, within a matter of a couple days, it turned the same color as old, spoiled colloidal silver, namely a brownish discoloration. It has to be clear to be of any use. So I immediately spilled it out and realized I can't use the solution when I dip the gauze. I have to use distilled water and MSM, and continue to use the ointment gel on the penis directly, on the head, on the glands directly, and then use the solution, the liquid, merely to dip the gauze. Merely to drink, but use distilled water and MSM to dip the gauze dressing into. Because MSM helps. It works well with silver. It softens up the head of the penis, makes it glistening, and makes it like a normal head. You know, not dried out. It helps. It's like a moisturizer, basically. It helps the head of the penis, the glands, become moisturized. Even though, you know, it's wet all the time, it doesn't really soak up water. It doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't want to. Yet you add MSM in that water, distilled water, and it becomes like a normal head is supposed to be. But because I've been doing this now for a few years on and off, it's very odd that when my penis is only slightly erect, you know, it's coming out of its turtle head position, retracted inside of its shell, and it's starting to come out a little bit, it looks like a plumb bob or a teardrop, because the base of the penis is more narrow than as you move outward from the body towards the tip. And that's due to the regeneration having taken place more towards the tip than towards the base. And so, you know, because when you cut off a foreskin, the penis atrophies due to lack of testosterone during the period of development in childhood when we could have benefited from the extra testosterone and then avoid midlife crisis, which has been forced on us, and that's a whole nother subject I won't get into. Anywho, it's shameful what we do. As if we take society to replace Surya, so that we no longer admit that Ra is where God is located. If you wanted to pray to an object, you don't have to make one. It's right there. It's up in the sky during daylight hours, and a reflection of it is on the moon during nighttime, you know. And poor substitute is all the stars when the moon is not out at night, because they're suns in their own right. But it's a poor substitute because they're so far away, you know. They look so minuscule by comparison to the sun. But those are substitutes of Ra. Those are Ra's in their own right. And of course, in the Sanskrit, you know, as opposed to the Egyptian it's Ra, but in the Sanskrit it's Rama, or Ram, which amounts to the same thing, so more or less. And interestingly enough, the word that qualifies the Manipura chakra, the third chakra, the solar plexus, is Ram. It's Ram. And we call it the solar plexus, and it's Ram. So, you know, the sun and Ra and Ram and Rama and Surya are pretty much equivalencies. We can take it to be equivalencies. But Rama is a name, or I don't want to say a bija mantra, but I guess it is for that chakra, for the Manipura chakra. See, Manipura is the name of the chakra, but Ram is its bija mantra. So, but Surya is what it is. It's the sun. And that's where God is located, for all intents and purposes, because, what is that? She's a psychic, I forget her, forget her name, Claire Prophet. Claire Prophet, I think, was her name or something. And she had said that the creator of our local universe, namely our solar system, resides in the sun. And he created all the souls for this solar system. You know, if you're a visitor from another solar system, or an emigre from another solar system, that's a different story. But the ones who are native to this solar system, which is the majority who live here, were created here by an archangel called Michael, who lives in the sun, who she called Michael. And we have a movie in which John Travolta plays the part of Michael. But that's an angel, not an archangel, I believe. Anyway. So this video was supposed to focus on Surya, and be my first attempt at making a video post the loss of my Vinyasi channel. And I'm going to put this on my yoga channel. I should say something about why that channel disappeared. Somebody was flagging 3 videos that were, you know, they thought they were inappropriate in the sexuality department. Well, I thought they were fine and dandy because I wasn't necessarily naked, but, you know, YouTube and I apparently differ on what it means to be sexual content. And I thought, well, I wasn't depicting anything naked, you know, but I was talking about it. And I might have had an erection covered by cloth. So I guess what you would call that is PG-13 or something, you know. I don't think it's R-rated. I don't think it would be R-rated, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe that would make it an R rating. Maybe that's the way they make the equivalence. It's not PG-13 anymore at that point. Anyway, it was on the subject of sexuality. Obviously, you know, something to do with the penis or foreskin or circumcision or whatever. But that's what took it down. And all I had to do was flag 3 videos for deletion within 3 months or less. And that is a 3 strikes out clause in the YouTube contract with us. And that takes down the whole channel. And it also puts limitations on my other channels in which I can't make any changes to the channel in terms of its structure. I can still post to the other channels, but that's about it. Now, there's a reason for why I did those sexual videos, and here it is. So this is a very smorgasbord video. I just got all kinds of stuff in here. A little catch-up for you guys and gals. There are parasites in the tap water here from the well water that I'm, you know, used to, because now I know to eat cloves. You know, take a capsule of cloves with every meal. to kill off the eggs to a certain degree, the egg stage of parasite development, so as to keep parasites at bay. But once every spring for the last 2 springs, I've gotten spider bites, and I get a whole new influx of parasites. So, there are all different ways of getting parasites living around here. But in any case, in fact, I had a spider bite this morning. Or no, yesterday. And I have this lotion I put on it that immediately the itching and irritation went away immediately, completely, and never came back. And it's a combination of liquid oil, grapeseed oil in my case, beeswax, high quality beeswax that comes in 1 ounce bars, five or six of them, I guess, at a time on Amazon, and turpentine, food grade turpentine, from Diamond G as in Georgia, DiamondGForestProducts.com. No, Diamond G Forest Products, DiamondGProducts.com, Diamond G Forest Products. I can't remember which it is. Anyway, and I did a video that was deleted, I believe, because it was on my Vinyasa channel. I'm not sure, but I think so. It was on the subject of why it is that our genitals are near our anus, because the Creator wanted to make sure that we maintain an interest in sexuality and not lose interest. So He put the two together or nearby so that the parasites in the colon could infect the genitals and pressure us into maintaining our interest in our sexuality. Because when I fasted on fruits and vegetables for 2 years when I was a teenager, 6 months into the fast, I lost all compulsion towards sexual activity. I was still sexually capable of activity, but I didn't bother pursuing it because I never had an interest anyway. It was just pressures of the body that pushed me, pressures of the mind, pressures of the body, pressures of the emotions. But all those pressures left me because the parasites were starved to death. I literally starved them out of my body. It's one way to get rid of them. So now I gotta backtrack. So that's why I did those videos, because I didn't understand. And now I understand, and so I don't have a compulsion. I can go there if I want to and masturbate if I want to, but it's to my advantage if I don't, because I'm a limited energy level. So it's best I don't go there. So when I spread the gel over the head of my penis, I try to go easy, and don't do it too much. Just work it in, but don't spend too much time there. Let's see, what else? I think I've covered everything. So I've given you some catch-up on current events, and I've given you the topic of the video, and I've given you some sidebars, and that's not bad. I've given you a lot of material to work with, so I'm going to put this up on my yoga channel. Actually, I think I'll put it up on my foreskin regeneration channel as well. See, I made those channels the last time my Vinyasa channel was attacked, because I knew I needed that as a safeguard, because I never would have been able to create them had I never done them and waited till now. So that was my plan B. I put it into place, but I didn't really use it a whole lot because I didn't need to. I went back to using my Vinyasa channel, and whoever was attacking me didn't attack me again. But see, now they were attacking my name, basically. They got an issue with Vinyasa spreading these videos around, claiming that he knows something, when he's not an MD, he's not a PhD, he's not this, he's not that, and they're jealous, or they're angry, or envious, or they're spiteful, or whatever, vengeful. Who cares? It's none of my business. It's your loss. It's not mine, because my gain was doing it. That's all I got out of it, was to do it. Is tape it and post it, and that's it. Once it's posted, out of sight, out of mind. That's the whole point. It's therapy. It's therapeutic for me. And that keeps the waters of creativity flowing freely and growing and evolving. Is the doing. The recording or the loss of the recording is really everybody else's loss and not mine, because I'll never do them again, you know. But and I have no inclination to repost copies unless somebody requests specifically by title, you know, because I have no desire to go back and redo them. Once they're done, and then I move on to something else. And so that's just the way we're going to have to deal with this, you know, is roll with it, as Charlie would say. Just roll with it. So now I've grown out of my parasite dominant stage, in which parasites don't dominate me anymore. And so I don't have to be sexual, you know, to be happy. And there are other reasons too, but I won't get into that. Well, just that I'm spending more time focusing on my meditation twice a day. And that's giving me a good deal of satisfaction. And so I don't have to do anything else for satisfaction, you know. I'm just doing this because a thought comes to mind, and it's what I do. It's reflexive, you know. It's like Eric Dollard says, you know, you don't change somebody's stripes just because you keep beating them up. They still keep doing what they do, you know. And creativity is normal for me. I suspect what Charlie Lutz described is a second set of genitals in the throat chakra. Most people have lost this because of the abuse of truth. Most people lie to get ahead, and they wouldn't think twice to do it, thinking, it's just a little white lie, who cares, who'll notice. That's how you lose that creative fiat that is located in the throat chakra, in which what you speak becomes reality. What you intend with your speech becomes reality, because it's really the silent aspect of speech is the intention behind the speech. And you don't have to speak an intention. All you have to do is intend it. And if we had full development of our psychic capacity and the second set of genitals operating in the throat chakra, our intention alone would recreate this planet into a garden that it once was, and that's what some of our children or children's children will do in the near future. They will be 2,800 years ahead of their parents and ahead of us, and their parents will have a hard time keeping up with their children because they won't be able to. And those children will literally recreate the planet into the Garden of Eden that it once was. And it should be. Instead of all this mayhem and destruction and pollution that we have instead. Literally, they'll just, the fiat of their intention will just do it. But in my weak way, I still have that in the throat. I just can't, materialize objects, But it does put a silent power behind speech, and that can scare people. And I think it scares them because it shakes up the maintenance of their status quo, induces fear, which is the realm of Vishnu. And their maintenance of their status quo comes under question at that point. And that's about the only power left in the silent power of my intention behind my voice, is that ability to scare people. So we shouldn't be surprised at their response. If it means the only way to make themselves feel comfortable with themselves, fully with their conscience, is to destroy the record of what I've put out, then so be it. That's the best they can do to cope with life. It's a challenge for them. Hey, you got to give them credit. They're doing the best they can with the oars that they have to make their way in their little boat of life. It's the best they can, and that's the best that anybody can do. Everybody does the best they can do, and it may vary based on consciousness, and karma, which is all the same thing. But it's the best anybody can do. So, I'm still taping. Try to get over my nose hairs and my big nose. This is a fisheye lens on this sports camera that I got for $60 on Amazon, and it works like a charm. I love this camera. I can't stand the cameras on cell phones. I go with a regular camera any day, a digital camera, but this was the cheapest one available, and so I have yet to spend the money on anything fancier than this. So you're just going to have to put up with my big nose. I mean, not that it was small to begin with, not that it is small to begin with, but as we age, the cartilage on the nose keeps adding and expanding, so it doesn't get any smaller. But the fisheye makes it even bigger. And then I get lazy and I hold it down here, and then you get to see my nose hairs, and I rarely, if ever, hold it up high like this I'm doing now. What else? I think that's it that I want to say at the moment. I think so. So, oh, there's one other thing. I think what scared the person, might have been the motivation for taking down my channel, was the fact that if I have a guess who it was. Somebody who knows me, because it happened around my birthday. Sort of, kind of a birthday gift, you know, taking down my channel, right? What was I going to say? One of the benefits that I do get, the post benefits of posting my videos, is that people come and comment, and sometimes actually learn something, and I'm surprised with the knowledge that people possess that I don't have, because I can be pretty snooty, thinking that I know this, that, and the other thing, and it's only because I've spent a whole lifetime in study. That's all I do. I don't do anything else. Ask me to make money, forget it. Ask me to hold down a job or a white picket fence, forget it. I don't know how, because I refuse to compete, and that's pretty much what you have to do in today's world to maintain the quality of life that people are accustomed to. But I don't do that. I don't compete. I refuse to. It's like a religious vow that I took in my teenage years in defiance to the lies and the petty theft going on in my family that I realized at the time. I decided I don't want to have anything to do with this. I'll just study. And that's what I've done. Lived in my ivory tower my whole life, studying. So I'm good at one thing. And so that kind of makes me a little snooty. But once in a while somebody surprises me with knowledge I don't possess, and I gain knowledge. And one of them recently was to point out something I already knew, but from another angle, and that is that 1 in 4 schizophrenics suffer from pyrole, or pyrole disorder, Pyrrole, and one of the ways to treat that is with nutritional supplementation with B6, vitamin B6, and zinc. And I had previously learned about the methylation problem involving autistic people, in which zinc is also a major supplement to help them out of their autism, or to help them cope, or to help improve themselves slightly to some degree. And then when I investigated the absorbability of various zinc supplements, there's only one that's 100% absorbable, and that's zinc acetate, a salt of vinegar. A zinc salt of vinegar. And there are some lozenges online that you can get that have zinc acetate in them, you know, on Amazon, and there's also a powder, a pure powder you can get, and you can make your own sugar cubes out of zinc acetate and sugar, and leave out the peppermint oil if you don't like that, which I plan on trying to do, which is not hard to do, really. And then I'll be able to make my own dosage of zinc. And I have B complex I take once a day, if not twice. A methylated B complex. Well, 2 of the B complex are methylated instead of 3. I guess if I really wanted methylation, 3 of them should be methylated, but I only have the B12 and the folate are methylated. Not B... I forget which of the third one can be methylated. B3 or B6 or B7, I don't know, one of them. So I suspect it would undermine the credibility of the person who I suspect is the person who took down my channel recently, or one of his henchmen, or henchwomen, due to the fact that in order for him to look good, I have to look bad. And if I'm not schizophrenic, if I'm simply a malabsorption of zinc, suffering from developmentally my whole life, that caused me to, you know, have a poor development and a mental disorder that went with it, all due to zinc malabsorption, and especially during gestation in my mother's womb, then, which he didn't suffer from because he didn't have that problem. My mother was stronger when he was conceived, but my mother was weaker, and so it was like two different mothers, gave birth to two different brothers 7 years apart. And this one is congenitally defective, in that I don't digest things very well. And the equivalent to digestion is immunity, because that's what the white blood cells do. They digest pathogens in the bloodstream, but they do it outside the stomach. But it's still the digestive process. So it's weak in my physiology, and so I take zinc now because of that comment that somebody made. And I can't thank the person enough for that comment, because I didn't want to spend the money on zinc acetate. I thought it was a waste of time when I first learned about autism. So this was Mother Nature trying to greet me again a second time, and maybe I've had to pay for it by losing my channel, because before it was merely about autism. Now, which I didn't think I had, now it's about a misdiagnosis of my condition. And I think that ruins the credibility of this person that I suspect is the one behind the taking down of my channel. So now I think I've given you all the information I need to help you catch up with current events. And in addition to talk about circumcision and Surya and shame. Yeah, as a nudist, see, I've gotten so accustomed to shame that I don't even notice that I should be ashamed for walking around naked. And I don't understand it. I don't understand why people think it's something to be embarrassed about, and there's something morally derelict in my psychology that, I don't recognize it the same way everybody else does. But if we go back to the video that I'm making now, to that section in which I talk about being a slut for knowledge, you'd understand. I'm a Vata personality. I mean, I may have been born with a certain balance of the three doshas, but right now I'm mostly Vata with a little Pitta, and not a whole lot of Kapha to speak of. And my biggest problem actually is my Vata imbalance. Sometimes my Pitta too, because I do have some Pitta that can be thrown out of balance. So I do something for that now. I restarted a few days ago. So I have that a little bit under control, at least. Pacified. But Vata is the dosha behind Ganesh, and lust is the emotion associated there too. And thirst for knowledge is really another way of saying a slut for wisdom. And that should put into perspective why I don't mind being naked, because I'm a slut for knowledge. I'm a slut for wisdom. Why not? Talk about polygamy. Some people think they're not polygamous because they only marry one woman at a time, but that's polygamy of a type, because some people think you marry once, it doesn't matter what happens if you lose that spouse, whatever. Why get married again? You've already been married, It's hard. It for some of us. It's very difficult. But it could be if we're lusty people. It was hard enough for us to get married in the first place, so it's even harder in the second place. Unless we're totally swept away, by falling in love with people one after another. Or we get tired of one and we dump her or him and go on to somebody else. But when it comes to knowledge, yes, I am a slut for wisdom or a slut for knowledge. Call it what you will, That's the nature of the Vata dosha, is sluttiness, lust. And Ganesh is the personification of that. He's never depicted that way, but symbolically it's all there. The metaphoric symbols are all there. If we don't care to pay attention, that's, hey, what do I care, Just pay attention, Symbols are powerful, The shape of a glass Coke bottle, classic glass Coke bottle of Coca-Cola is is a woman's body. Come on, you know. It was helped to sell more product. I'm sure it worked among all the guys. Now I really covered a lot. So I think now it's time to sign off. Okay. I think I can. I know I will. Here we go.